art of poetry. And sitting with me is Gemma Mathewson. Oh, we've been doing this for quite some time, quite a few years. Yes. And today we are devoting the entire show to Ukrainian poetry in light of current events. The heartbreaking images of injured and wounded children and children who are set adrift by their parents who want to save them is the most heartbreaking thing I've ever felt in my life of 80 years. I guess I've been closer to it in many ways, but it's also a celebration of Ukrainian spirit, which you've seen on display, and also fortitude and strength of will.
And courage.
And determination, and also talent.
That's true.
In so many ways, the resistance is there for everyone to see. Poetry is a celebration of a national spirit. We know that from so many experiences we have. And it's a privilege to come on today with Gemma, who's really gotten the show really spiritually solid.
It's not hard to find good poetry.
Oh, yeah.
With Ukrainian poets starting from the 19th century, the 1800s, but right up to a week or two ago.
A week or two ago, that's important.
People
are actually
responding.
And have been since 2014, when the first...
Right, the Crimean War. Yep.
And the invasion then produced a lot of poetry that I didn't know about. But Gemma brought me up to speed.
Yep.
And speaking of celebration of Ukrainian culture, Gemma has some wonderful colored eggs to show.
I'm not Ukrainian, but the Ukrainian people, since medieval times, have been decorating eggs in a style that's replete with symbolism. And these eggs, some of them are copies that I found in books from designs that they have been using for a long time to express their spiritual beliefs. And these eggs are typically made for Easter and given to a person that matches, they try to match them to the person's personality or something about the person in their lives. But there are symbolisms of the cross and stars. Sometimes they put roosters on them to symbolize strength and things like that. But I think the reason I wanted to show these, and I'm wearing a design too that's part of an egg, is to show we're talking about poetry today, but there's so much creativity in the Ukrainian history, and it's a long history.
11th century.
And I think that's important to note when today what's happening is someone saying, they're really part of Russia. They're really part of Russia. They've been themselves for millennia. So I just thought that was important to say from the very beginning.
They were the first to be called Rus. And Cyril and Methodius brought the Cyrillic alphabet and Christianity in 988 to Kiev. They predate. Amazing how the narrative has been twisted, unfortunately. the poets that come along, like Taras Shevchenko, are one of a kind. It seems that he is so far above the way Pushkin is in Russian literature. He's so far above everyone else that he's become known as the national poet. And Shevchenko started out as a romantic poet, first part of the 19th century, which was the whole genre that was alive and well and changing. And he actually went darker after the incursions that they suffered all along their history. So this is nothing new, unfortunately. Yeah. But the narrative is changed and twisted. So we have some poems for you. One, Taras Shevchenko, 1849, A Cloud Floating Behind the Sun. A cloud floating behind the sun spreads its red skirts and beckons the sun to sleep in the blue sea, covering it with a rose blanket as a mother would a child. Behold, for an hour, for a short hour, the heart rests and speaks to God, but then the fog, like the enemy, rolls in over the sea, concealing the rose-colored cloud. Darkness follows the gray fog. A dark silence envelops the soul till you don't know where to turn. Oh, so you long for it, for the next dawn, as a child longs for its mother. Well, that's the poem for today, truly.
It is.
Oh.
The separation is.
It's just unthinkable in my cosmos, because those issues are so heart-rending and heartbreaking.
And that was 1849. This was a poem written in response to a call from Rattle. Rattle is a poetry magazine. Responding to the war in Ukraine.
Now?
This is Tatiana Dolgushina. She says, this is her quote, "Russia and Ukraine are both my homeland, and I am a child refugee of the Soviet Union collapse in the 90s. I was born in Russia and grew up in both countries before having to leave due to increasing violence and after my father was kidnapped in Ukraine. My poem deals with forever losing one's home, the violent effect of war on a child, and the confusion and loss that a child experiences before they can understand any of it.
Oh, yes.
The Western world has little understanding of witnessing war on their doorsteps, especially when young and vulnerable. The current Russian-Ukraine war has brought up many memories and emotions for me, relating to my childhood experience all over again. I fear for the children and their families who are undergoing the same trauma that I experienced, which will displace, and already has displaced, and haunt them for the rest of their lives." And the poem is called When War Makes a Child. When Americans think about war, they think about men with guns and soldiers in uniforms. When I think about war, I think about packing suitcases. I think about food shortages. I think about economic collapse. I think about my grandmother, the one we had to leave behind, the one whose mother moved her from town to town until they didn't see a war anymore, the one who was left an orphan in the middle of Siberia with her 13-year-old sister to take care of her. When I think about a war, I think about the cold walls of apartment buildings. I think about no heat in the house. I think about hotel rooms. I think about having to learn a new language in order to survive. When I think about war, I think about being a child standing on the coast of an ocean where the wind blows just enough to make one paranoid, just enough to feel like war is right around the corner, right around and behind you, touching you.
Oh.
So that was her reflection. And again, it's a long history of her family and how it just goes on and on.
And the grandmother in Siberia and the repetitive history of the Ukrainians being displaced and sent into exile. That was the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Put them on a train and send them to Siberia. That's how most of them perished in the 30s when Stalin cramped down. Each poem has such heaviness emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
It makes me think of the function of poetry to console, to be a solace. And I think pretty much most of what we'll read today is heavy.
Yes, that's
It's dark.
true. That's true.
And that isn't the entire story. Ashtray. Lyuba. That's a name that comes from I love you. Lyuba Yakimchik. Ashtray. No longer a building, no longer a home to mom, to dad, to me, to the vegetables in the fridge. Not a home, not a fortress, no longer of four walls, barely even fit to be a suitcase or a backpack. Now, a big, sooty ashtray for a God who inhales the smoke and lets fruit flies out of his mouth. Oh, what a biblical image is that. Fruit flies, the plagues, the 7 plagues of ancient times. Certainly worth the comparison, and certainly worthy of the comparison with biblical catastrophe, I think. I don't know her very well as a poet. I'm looking forward to following through and really finding out about all these new poets,
Right, right.
which is a wonderful blessing in a way. Here's another, Lyuba. Decomposition. Nothing changes on the Eastern Front. Well, I've had it up to here. At the moment of death, metal gets hot and people get cold. Don't talk to me about Luhansk. It's long since turned into Hansk. Lou had been razed to the ground, to the crimson pavement. My friends are hostages, and I can't reach them. I can't do Nietsk to pull them out of the basements, from under the rubble. Yet here you are, writing poems, ideally slick poems, high-minded, gilded poems, beautiful as embroidery. What a poem.
Yeah.
Reflecting in the moment on the contrast, but also the solace in writing the poem.
The first image of metal getting hot, I mean, that is just, it's just such a way around, but yet a physical reality of what happens in war and conflict.
And so many
bodies get cold, is that what it says?
bodies get cold,
Yeah.
and people get cold. Metal gets hot, and people get cold.
Right.
What a wonderful perspective. She can draw back and see the big picture and then focus immediately on something high-minded and beautiful as embroidery.
Right, because people too often think of poetry as just high-minded and beautiful or elegy, but poetry can be witness too.
Oh, it is, isn't it, here? Mm-hmm. Isn't it in its most searing function as witness? That's exactly what's going on. Witness for the ages, and as you have said and instructed me, this has been going on for 7, 8 years with the writing.
Right. Yes.
Concomitant with it.
Yes.
A couple of notes here.
Yes.
Very,
yes.
Very interesting. I can't do Nietsk.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And the thing about Russian and Ukrainian is you always use a double negative.
I can't. Oh, I see.
Oh, yeah.
I can't. Nothing. I can't.
Yeah. It's.
You wouldn't say I can't do anything. In other words. I get it.
I can't do nothing. Nietsk, niet. Luhansk is a town actually cut in half by the poet here, because the Hansk, a husk, something discarded from the liu, the love. It broke the town's name into, it used to be love of this town, and now it's broken entirely in two. The love has gone.
And it's a husk.
And it's a husk. Oh, as a poet will, almost inevitably
play with words.
Play those wonderful word games in the middle of the agony. Mm. The contrast in the pressure in these poems, the intensity, reminds me of some of Emily Dickinson's, actually.
Well, I have one that was written during the time of the annexation of Crimea and the war in Donbass, which was 2015 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
By Serhiy Zhadan, and it's called Take Only What Is Most Important. He's from Kharkiv. Take only what is most important. Take the letters, take only what you can carry. Take the icons and the embroidery. Mm-hmm. Take the silver. Take the wooden crucifix and the golden replicas. Take some bread, the vegetables from the garden, then leave. We will never return. We will never see our city again. Take the letters, all of them, every last piece of bad news. We will never see our corner store again. We will never drink from that dry well again. We will never see familiar faces again. We are refugees. We'll run all night. We'll run past fields of sunflowers. We'll run from dogs, rest with cows. We'll scoop up water with our bare hands, sit waiting in camps, annoying the dragons of war. You will not return. Your friends will never come back. There will be no smoky kitchens, no usual jobs. There will be no dreamy lights in sleepy towns, no green valleys, no suburban wastelands. The sun will be a smudge on the window of a cheap train.
Yeah.
Rushing past cholera pits covered with lime. There will be blood on your heels, tired guards on borderlands covered with snow, a postman with empty bags shot down, a priest with a hapless smile hung by his ribs, the quiet of a cemetery, the noise of a command post, and unedited lists of the dead so long that there won't be time to check for your own name. That is so chilling, but if you are to watch any of the current news about the current war, that the current tyrant committing war crimes against the civilians.
Absolutely.
It's happening just as this describes what happened 7-8 years ago.
And it's still so alive. The speaker is living it.
Yes.
Feeling it at every level, coming to terms with it. Will never come back. Take the icons. That's powerful.
Right. It starts out, take only what is important, and of course the person in their mind feels everything is important.
Yeah.
The icons, the embroidery, the silver, all the things they cherished, and then it gets reduced to vegetables and
Whatever could fit in that.
Whatever you need to survive, basically.
But let's widen out for a minute.
Yeah.
And just look at the bigger picture of the 3,000 who were killed since 2014 in the Donbass. And then even wider now to look at 3.5 million displaced from the country. Poland has taken 2 million. And I think we're always in the position of playing catch up in terms of help for the front lines. And occasionally there's a note that this priest from Quinnipiac went over for 10 days, and then this person from Old Lyme, Jerry Gill, who is doing a GoFundMe to go over and perform very special medical services. So there are these individuals who pop up on our side here who are realizing the gravity of it and giving of themselves, which is a bit of a solace. But this is the start. Well, the painful thing is this is the start of a long conflict from every indication that people are saying, although they keep talking about peace, doesn't seem realistic.
I don't really have a way to evaluate all of that. It seems so insensible to me.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. It seems almost as if brother is fighting brother, and the Ukrainians have no choice. I have no prediction for the future, just that the poets will keep telling us what's happening. And prayer. It's reached that point.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because this next poem is called Prayer by Luba.
Really?
Yes.
Luba. Good.
Say the last name again so I don't mess it up.
Yakimchik.
Okay, thank you.
Luba
Yakimchik.
Yakimchik. It's a musical.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Our Father, who art in heaven, of the full moon and the hollow sun, shield from death my parents, whose house stands on the line of fire, and who won't abandon it like a tomb. Shield my husband on the other side of the war, as if on the other side of a river, pointing his gun at a breast he used to kiss.
Oh.
I carry on me this bulletproof vest and cannot take it off. It clings to me like skin. I carry inside me this child and cannot force it out, for he owns my body through it. I carry within me a motherland and cannot puke it out, for it circulates like blood through my heart. Our daily bread give to the hungry and let them stop devouring one another. Our light, give to the deceived, and let them gain clarity. And forgive us our destroyed cities, even though we do not forgive for them our enemies. And lead us not into temptation to go down with this rotting world, but deliver us from evil, to get rid of the burden of a motherland, heavy and hardly useful. Shield from me my husband, my parents, my child, and my motherland. So it's a restructuring in her own experience that she's living through now, the Lord's Prayer, and it's very powerful.
And it's along that same line of decomposition. And that seems to be really a sense of things falling apart. Nothing is for sure. And each poem that you're reading really makes me feel closer to the front lines because of the detail and the personal sense of loss that's happening in the moment. It's hard to take all this in and realize the strife and also the animosity that's been going on since the 11th century, actually, after separate units got organized into different tribes. It's just hard to bring all that together in my mind and realize just the toll of it all on a culture, on a mother. You know, there's a great focus in the poem on the mother who probably has to hold it together as best she can.
It's really hard to fathom.
It's hard to fathom and hard to fully feel. You know, we seem to have our own personal defenses too about what may come up. Abandonment's one of my issues, and I just can't even look when I see a child, 7, 8, or 9, you know, on TV who's been injured and just alone.
Right, or this 80-year-old woman talking about her husband being blown up in front of her.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about the children, and I totally relate to that. But a woman that spent all her life with this man and she's got bandages all down her arms.
Saw that.
I mean, I don't know what bringing us so close, or the GPS of being able to see the technology of being there to experience it and yet being safely removed, is just, it's frustrating, but it's certainly not the level of pain that people are there and can't leave or have left and have no home now.
Right,
because there's nothing there.
In the middle of a journey whose end they can't see. It's jarring and very disjointed in our consciousness. And, you know, as individuals here pop up and donate or volunteer, that's a sense of getting some sense of control over lives, but I just pray it almost speechless leaves me, especially when you decompose a prayer that's so well known as the Our Father.
Right.
Where else can people turn? To what can they, I think we've reached the real half point and the solid morning that you and I are feeling, actually. So,
Did you want to talk about some of the photographs that you...
I do, but I wanted to tease out or squeeze out or...
Some of these poems, yeah, go for it. Which one?
You filled in a couple of lines, you said.
Yeah, which poem would you?
Autumn begins with something trivial.
Okay, let me find that one. Where is it? Okay. I'm sorry. Tell me.
Or Yuri Savatsky.
Oh, that one I think I'm going to skip.
Okay.
Okay, autumn begins with something trivial. I'll read that one. Autumn begins, this is written by Ella Yevtushenko?
Yeah.
Okay. Autumn begins with something trivial. Keys forgotten in another city. Silver coins of cough in the throat. A Turkish cup of tea. Copper coins. Water in the battery. Hail. I do not feel it, and it is already here, huddling a stray cat, rubbing its legs, leaving faded leaves on jeans. Only such a rainy night there can be knocking on the balcony door. Only on such a rainy night can it be opened. But who will be behind it depends on whether the nut fell asleep or its guard under the window, whether the pines will reach the torn hem of the clouds, and whether lightning repeats the patterns of veins on your temples. Autumn begins with something childish. It knocks on the door and runs away. I want to read all day in bed. You are wrapped like a mummy, damp gauze of mist. And continue with something old. It does not take any alcohol. A diamond of coal pulsates at its knees. And so again, every time this is the first topic of conversation. As if there is nothing more important than this autumn, wet as a morning under a prematurely peeled crust. It steals airtime from work conversations. It intercepts waves of gossip. It lies down with a stray cat on the balcony where piles of secrets should gather. Autumn drives us to the kitchen and makes us put the kettle on. Mm-hmm. Autumn begins with something trivial, but grows quickly, like other people's children. A penny of winter will roll out of its cold womb. The snow will cover the mummified us, frozen in half a word then. No one knocks on the balcony window in the middle of the night any longer, and then there is a general risk of ceasing to exist for a while. So that's a very foreboding poem.
It is.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And
this imagery of the cat, the stray cat, comes back again and again.
Yes. And the knocking. I wonder if Ella Yevtushenko is related to Yevtushenko in the 60s. He was quite the flashy poet. In the 60s, he came to the UN and he wowed them all. He was very dramatic. But that's a name that, is very powerful in poetry circles. So I suspect there's some connection.
Could be a connection.
Yeah.
There. I don't know. I haven't. Could research that probably later.
That'd be fun. What else of these struck you?
Well, there's one called Love in Kiev, which it does take you a little bit away from the war theme, but not completely. Love in Kiev. More terrible is love in Kiev than magnificent Venetian passions. Butterflies fly light and maculate into bright tapers, dead caterpillars' brilliant wings aflame. And spring has lit the chestnut's candles, cheap lipstick's tender taste, the daring innocence of miniskirts, and these coiffures are not cut quite right. Yet image, memory, and signs still move us, tragically obvious, like the latest hit. You'll die here by a scoundrel's knife. Your blood will spread like rust inside a brand new Audi in an alley in Tartarka. You'll plunge here from a balcony, the sky, down headlong to your dirty little Paris, dressed in a blouse of secretarial white. You can't discern the weddings from the deaths, for love in Kiev is more terrible than ideas of new communism. Specters emerge in the intoxicated nights out of Bald Mountain, bearing in their hands red flags and pots of red geraniums. You'll die here by a scoundrel's knife. You'll plunge here from a balcony, the sky, and a brand new Audi from an alley in Tartarka, down headlong to your dirty little Paris. Your blood will spread like rust upon a blouse of secretarial white. You can see the structure there is repetition and reverse. Yeah.
Oh, yes,
So,
and the color contrast. And also the almost thematic contrast of elaboration and art with death. Yeah, the war is in there. A couple of notes. Bald Mountain is Mussorgsky's wonderful Night on Bald Mountain,
okay, yeah.
where
yeah.
the big beast comes. It's powerful in the imagination.
I could hear it, but I can't sing
Yes,
it. Yeah.
it's so wonderful. And it traumatized me as a kid.
Wow.
Wow. So passions are rampant, running all over Kiev. So Kiev, Lvov, really the whole mass of Ukraine is a series of contrasts too. It's a big enough country, 45, 50 million people, 44 million people. Let's take a look at some of the earlier scenes. You know, I hit a dead wall emotionally and imaginatively when we're faced with this. And about at the half, I just felt I just needed to
Move away. Yeah.
move away. And I think that's probably a natural reaction. So, Chris, can you pull up some of those wonderful shots from 61 years ago in the Ukraine? There we go. That's an overview of Kiev, which sits on a river, the Dnieper River, and is just so settled and peaceful and intact, and just from a 19-year-old boy's view, just paradise, where in April the local people, Kievan beach is alive with people swimming, and that's 61 years ago, almost today, since I made the trip with Fordham University. And now, of course, it is bombed, and all those neighborhoods are suffering from haphazard explosions. So I think we're faced here with bigger questions like time which repeats itself somehow so cruelly that the poets have to react to, oh no, not again. Do we do this every 100 years? We do this every 50 years? And my personal experience there was so wonderful as a 19-year-old. Everything through my eyes had this romance to it, you know. First trip across the sea. Let's see a few more. Yeah, that's the Dnieper. The river runs through it, and it's just such a huge river, which makes sense in terms of the settlement. Kievan Rus. It's called Kievan Rus back in the 10th century, when it was the first established, actually, outpost from Constantinople. So they have their own Sancta Sophia, which is an imitation of the one in Constantinople. Christian, of course.
Yeah.
Now, and there we were on a trip through the river, looking at both sides. And as you know, this is a good example. One side of a river is always flat, and the other side is elevated. So that first view that we saw was from the high point of the hills on the other side of the Dnieper. And on this side, it's flat. Rivers tend to do that.
Yeah.
And let's go on to another one. We're going to go to farmland in the Ukraine. And of course, everybody knows it's the breadbasket. And
That's the yellow. That's the symbolism of the yellow on the bottom of the flag.
Thank you.
The top is the sky and the river.
Yes.
And the bottom is the wheat fields, the golden wheat fields.
Beautiful. Blue sky and golden wheat fields. Yeah, could we have that?
Sorry.
There we go. It's just so bucolic. And of course, in 1961, it was still with the Soviet Union. It was just ramping up. And poets had a little break then, because Khrushchev denounced Stalin, and there was what they called the thaw, Otyepel. So out from the woodwork come all the poets. We've got a reprieve. We can start writing again, and we don't have to worry about who's looking over our shoulder, which has been the story of Russia since the beginning. And it was rich farmland, just the breadbasket of the world. Still. And President Zelensky said, come on, farmers, you've got to go back into the field. Can you imagine going back into the fields? You know, your thousands and thousands of acres, but you're a target? Oh, you know, it's just, the contrasts are just so painful and overwhelming. And
Absolutely.
Then let's go on to Lvov. Yeah, that's the cathedral in Lvov. Everybody seems to say Lviv, but it's Lvov. Yeah, which had been Polish, then Russian, Ukrainian. So isn't it interesting how those cities switch nationality depending on the century you're in? Mm-hmm. Lvov, still, it's a huge city, very rich culturally, and the Opera House is a stunner. That's next. He slipped in there, Lenin. Every big city had a big statue to Lenin. Now, things have changed the last 30 years in the Soviet Union since the dissolution of SSSR. And Lenin has been deposed in all his statues in related countries, but unfortunately in Russia, Putin is trying to resurrect Stalin as a hero. It's just so counterintuitive,
Yeah.
counter everything.
I
It's just so painful to even try to use logic.
right. It's the ogre of all disinformation
Oh, gosh.
that ogre is perpetrating.
And who knows what the Russians will do eventually, now that they realized so much of their comforts are being taken care away. Oh, I think we got the Opera House there too. There we go. Yeah.
And the culture.
And the culture, just a repository, really, of the culture. It's just a beautiful city, which so far, I believe, although now the bombing is happening closer and closer to the city center. This has been the most painful and moving show I think I've ever experienced, because my heart is so close.
I'm sure with all your experience.
And the
of
history, you
cultures.
know, to go from age 19 up
To that.
close
Yeah.
and really personal, and then the sort of demystification of all of that, you know, first time travel across the sea, and the magic of seeing a country
Sure.
in full
And
flower.
if it's not there anymore for you, imagine what it's like to be not there anymore for people who it's their daily reality
And their loved ones.
and their loved ones. Sure.
Um,
Could I just mention this real briefly, because I wanted
oh,
to.
let's
maybe 5
not
minutes left.
forget him.
That's okay. This is Ilya Kaminsky, and the book is called Deaf Republic, and it is a collection of poems that tells a story. And we won't be able to get to all of it, or any of it really today, but I just wanted to let people know that it's one of the best poetry books I've ever read.
Wow.
And I have go back to it again and again. I got it as a gift in 2019, and it is written by a man who became blind when he was 4 years old. He's from Ukraine, and he wrote this book again about the Crimean, the experience he had with the Crimean, and just the strife, the ongoing strife in Ukraine with Russian aggressors.
Give us one.
I'll give you one. The first one is the introduction. And now this is because he lives in the United States now. He's a professor. He teaches writing, he teaches poetry. We lived happily during the war. We lived happily during the war, and when they bombed other people's houses, we protested. But not enough. We opposed them, but not enough. I was in my bed, around my bed. America was falling. Invisible house by invisible house by invisible house. I took a chair outside and watched the sun. In the 6th month of a disastrous reign in the house of money and the street of money, in the city of money, in the country of money, our great country of money, we, forgive us, lived happily during the war.
Wow.
So it's about the indifference. But you know, I noticed of all the American companies that left Russia, Halliburton did not. Surprise, surprise. And the Koch brothers did not.
Yes.
So what does that tell you about the country of money?
Yes.
And, you know, the
that sums it up.
So,
Could you show the cover again?
Sure.
It's really so effective.
if you have a chance to check him out online, there's readings that he does that are wonderful. And he
The ear.
he just has such a great way with poetry. And he talks about poetry. Poetry does not begin with one blind man in Greece. Civic poetry and devotional poetry are both children of a lyric poem telling us the story of our tribe. Poems began with wailing songs. They began with lullabies. They began with prayers when a child was having a hard time falling asleep, and the mother would half pray that her child would fall asleep and half talk to her child, half prayer, half lullaby. The truth is, I knew that as a refugee, I would have to write a book that would speak both the former USSR Ukraine part of me and the US part of me. So I knew the book would have to be a fable, combining different stories, something that can speak of more than one place. The shape came midway when I realized that although I set out to write a narrative, it was the lyrics I was most fascinated by. So I went for a hybrid form, something that allowed me to stay with lyrics, meaning poetry, while allowing short prose pieces throughout the book to propel the narrative and create a momentum of sorts. The lyrics would allow the reader to slow down, to stay in the moment, and that is why a hybrid genre is useful for poets who approach narrative, I feel. It happens when you need to say something that cannot be said otherwise, something for which you don't seem to find a ready-made form but needs to be said regardless. If you're a refugee, that's pretty much your situation. Established genres don't get at what you want to say. You are not in Ukraine, you are not in America. How do you stop being an immigrant, even though you have lived for over 20 years? That is the difficulty.
What a wonderful encapsulated approach that we can understand. It's beautiful. I love that opening. Could you read that again? The opening is poetic.
Poetry did not begin with one blind man in Greece. Civic poetry and devotional poetry are both children of a lyric poem telling us the story of our tribe.
Wow. And that just is the ultimate perspective. The blind man in Greece. Homer, oh my goodness.
And then one more line that I left off from the bottom. The difficulty with hybrid genres is to create a pattern that speaks both to your Russian, Ukrainian, Jewish part and your American living 9 miles from the violent USA-Mexican border in San Diego part.
Wow.
So, you know, he's saying, yeah, there's refugees and there's refugees.
Yes, yes.
And so it's an awareness.
And he found his way.
Yeah.
With irony. Yes. Oh, that was, I would love to hear him read.
Oh, yes, and you can.
I can. And how do we do that?
Well, I just Googled his name, and there's a good reading that he does and narration with the Brookline Bookstore, but there are several. So just Google him, Ilya Kaminsky, and Deaf Republic, and you'll find him reading online.
So let me spell his name out. Ilya Kaminsky, I-L-Y-A. Could we do a close-up on this? I-L-Y-A. Ilya Kaminsky, K-A-M-I, even closer. We've got to get his name in here. I-L, there we go. Oh, yeah, there we go. Ilya Kaminsky. That's a perfect way to end with his identification here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, Gemma, where do we go from here?
Well,
There's prayer. There's fallback. My go-to is to call the senators and representatives.
and keep telling the truth. Keep telling the truth for
telling
what
the
it is.
truth,
Right.
which is the war now.
It is a
It's-
war, and atrocities are being committed by a tyrant.
And there's the parallel there. The war is a lie, conceptually.
Yes, it is.
You know? Especially back from Homer.
The justification of it, yes.
Yes. Ah, well, we shall see. Thank you, Emily. We're all set. We've had a full hour. We're depleted.
I
Thank
have
you,
to,
Gemma, most of all,
Thank you, Frank.
for the curating of this show.
Such as it was.
Yes, with our pictures.
Oh,
and
thank you for that history. Wonderful. Perspective.
And we look forward to next time, which is National Poetry Month. We'll have our poster up here.
Yay.
Yay! So, till next time.